Thank you so much for logging on to the RAISE 2020 exciting session on the future of work. RAISE is all about responsible artificial intelligence for social empowerment. And this event has galvanized a number of speakers across the world to participate in, share their thoughts, share their views, share their learnings, and share their suggestions on how we can take AI for social good. How, beyond being an instrument for economic growth and technological growth, AI can empower people and enable everybody to benefit because of a rapidly changing world due to technology. As all of you are aware, technology is changing the very shape of the world that we are living in. It is changing the way you are experiencing the world. It is changing the way the world is experiencing you. 3D printing, robotics, IoT devices, miniaturized electronics, augmented virtual reality, artificial intelligence, all of these are coming together, along with affordable, accessible, available, and very advanced technologies sweeping the landscape. In a country like India, this is even more pertinent. With 1.3 billion people in our country, with over 65% of our country under 35 years old, with what we call as a demographic dividend, with 150 to 200 million young students entering into the workplace over the next 5 to 10 years. How are we going to ensure that this 1.3 billion people who are dependent upon this 150 to 200 million young students entering into the workplace are empowered in order to be able to carry on their responsibilities and build a nation, not only from an economic point of view, but also from a social point of view? It calls us all to discuss and deliberate on the future of work, how these emerging technologies can be assimilated into the workforce. Is AI going to do good, or is there another side of AI which is going to create problems? And that requires us not only to deliberate, but also to prepare ourselves and see how we can avoid the problems that AI can create and how we can amplify the good that AI can benefit not only people in India, but across the rest of the world. I'd now like to introduce the panel speakers. We have a very distinguished line of speakers here today, and I'd like to share a little bit about their profile. Mr. Prashant Pathak, he's the CEO of Ekagrata Inc. Mr. Prashant Shankar Pathak, President and CEO of Ekagrata Inc., a principal investment company, is a leading name in Canada, known for his expertise on international management and operations, strategy, and product development. He has advised numerous global corporations on a wide range of operational issues across North America, South America, and Europe. He also serves as the managing partner of Reichman Haar Capital Partners, a Canadian private equity firm, and is the chairman of Venture Capital and Investments Committee, BDC Venture Capital, which is Canada's largest VC program. The government of Canada has also appointed Mr. Pathak on the board of BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada. In 2008, he was listed as one of Canada's top 40 under 40 by Caldwell Partners. We are also privileged to have Mr. Julien Barbier, co-founder and CEO at the Halberton School. Julien Barbier is the co-founder and CEO at Halberton School. Prior to Halberton School, he worked as a senior director of growth, marketing, and community at Docker Inc. Barbier holds a master's degree from ESL SCA and is a master of computer sciences in engineering, computer, and from Epitech. We are delighted to have Mr. Sridhar Vembu, Zoho founder. He is the CEO of Zoho Corporation, formerly AdventNet Inc. Mr. Sridhar is this company has been behind the Zoho suite of online applications. Prior to AdventNet, Sridhar worked as a wireless system engineer at Qualcomm, where he was fortunate to work with some of the leading minds in wireless communications. We are also delighted to have Dr. Urvashi Aneja, who is the co-founder and director of Tandem Research in India. Urvashi Aneja is the founding director of Tandem Research. She works on the governance and sociology of emerging technology, Southern Partnerships for Humanitarian and Development Assistance, and the power and politics of global civil society. We are privileged to have Mr. Rajiv Sodhi, Chief Operating Officer, Microsoft India. Rajiv Sodhi, COO, Microsoft India, is focused on empowering customers to transform their businesses with the interplay of cloud and other digital-first technologies by driving organization-wide operational efficiencies and a culture of collaboration. Prior to this role, he was leading the transformation of Microsoft's partner ecosystem in India and was accountable for their startups and small and mid-sized businesses. In 2012, he started GoDaddy in India with an empowering goal of bringing an entire nation online. Prior to GoDaddy, he spent over 11 years at Microsoft, which shaped most of his career and was instrumental in giving him diverse experiences. We're also delighted to have Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, researcher and author speaker. Born in 1950, Rajiv Malhotra is an Indian American researcher, writer, speaker, and public intellectual on current affairs as they relate to civilizations, cross-cultural encounters, religion, and science. He studied physics at the St. Stephen's College in Delhi and went on to do his postgraduate studies in physics and then computer science in the USA. Rajiv has served in multiple careers, including software development executive, Fortune 100 senior corporate executive, strategic consultant, and successful entrepreneur in the information technology and media industries. At the peak of his career, when he owned 20 companies in several countries, he took early retirement at the age of 44 to pursue philanthropy, research, and public service. So we are having a fantastic panel, a very diverse panel with diverse experiences, and I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting, enlightening, and a thought-provoking session. Sridhar, are you there? Sridhar Bembu? What do you see as the concerns about artificial intelligence and work possibilities for both the present and the future of AI? It would be great to hear from you.
First of all, I would like to say, as AI is, I see it as a continuum of technologies that we have already been on a technology adoption curve in the world for the last 250 years. So I don't see it as something fundamentally different from it. And certainly the AGI, where it's going to replace humans in a full sense, I don't believe people who know the technology think that that's anywhere close. So that's not a fear. As a software engineer, I'm not that worried about that prospect being replaced. But coming to jobs, the question about jobs really ultimately comes down to, let's do this thought experiment. Let's take, imagine a machine. And, in science fiction, like Star Trek series, you have the replicator. For those of you who's familiar with this, which can produce anything that you want, essentially anytime you want, right? So at free of cost. Imagine that such a machine were to exist. Well, absolutely nobody needs to do any work because everybody could just get a machine. But what would people do, right? Even in that environment, ultimately it comes down to whether you can afford the goods or not, comes down to whether you have access to the machine. For example, if you select people who own the machine and they control the supply of goods and other people don't have access, even if the goods are made free of cost, well, many people may not have access to the goods because the people who have the ownership of the machines don't share it with them. So that question is not really a technical question at that point. It's a political or political economy question, right? If you had access to such a technology, well, would broad mass of people have access to the fruits of that machine, or would only a select few have that? It's not really a technical question at that point. It's really a political economy question. It's a distribution of resources question. And jobs are a mechanism by which we distribute the fruits of all the productivity. And the human capacity to invent jobs is infinite. For example, in Japan, right now, there are jobs for, you can hire a friend to go out for a tea and talk to you for half an hour or 1 hour. And they're charged some $15 or $20 an hour for that service, where you simply go and talk to them for an hour or two. They'll listen to you and they'll be very sympathetic, all of that. And it's a lonely society and there is a market for this service. You wouldn't think in Indian context that such a thing merits a service and a business model and revenue, all of that. But such a thing exists in Japan. And I can imagine, for example, in this context where I am in a village in southern India, there are a lot of peacocks around, our national bird. I can imagine peacock caretaking jobs. When we are a very rich society where we can afford all kinds of goods easily, taking care of peacocks could actually be jobs. right? Right now, nobody does that job. There's no jobs like that. And so I am not actually personally worried that jobs will be a problem as long as we have a reasonable political economy that is that balances the various interests well. And a lot of the world's problems come from a faulty distribution network, an incorrect political economy, rather than technology causing the problem itself. Technology is neutral in this, value neutral. You know, unlike the machine I mentioned, the hypothetical machine, such a machine doesn't exist. But even if such a machine existed, I would not worry about jobs, because we can always invent jobs to distribute the fruits. For example, we can have lots of musicians who sing for other people, and they with that limited amount of work that they do, limited amount of hours they sing, they can make a very good living. So it is not a problem of jobs. It's a problem of distribution of the fruits of technology. In that sense, as a technologist, that we want to create technologies that make us more productive, produce with less effort. But we also need a sociology and political economy, all of that, right? So that people can lead purposeful, fruitful lives. And that also includes a spiritual component. I'm anticipating Dr. Malhotra's thing here, because that is also important. We cannot forget that man does not live by bread alone. Purely materialistic focus cannot make us happy. So we need a holistic focus that includes technology, that includes the political economy, the sociology, all of it. Then I think we can achieve a just distribution of the fruits of the technology. And that applies to AI technology, that applies to anything that makes us very productive. As far as the question that is some robots going to decimate the human race and completely wipe us out of the planet, I'd say it's far more likely that we humans being, through our own stupid actions, may wipe ourselves out rather than some robot doing it to us. Okay, so I'm not worried about that possibility either. So that's all I have to say, and thank you very much.
From there, I would like to go to Ms. Urvashi. Urvashi, taking on this question or the suggestion that he said, what's a reasonable political economy? And in this context, I'd like you to share, do you think job displacement through AI or automation is a real threat, particularly for countries with a large labor surplus? I mean, like India or other parts of Africa and emerging economies. And for already marginalized groups, I mean, we have a lot of marginalized groups who are 22% of our country is still below the poverty line, and we want to make sure that they come out of the poverty line. So this is a real fear that many people have, that artificial intelligence can displace jobs, or they may never find jobs because they don't have the skills and they don't have the capacity to acquire those new skills.
I do think that the threat to job displacement is real. Particularly for countries like India, where you have a large amount of your population that is low to medium skilled. A very small part of your population is high skilled labor. So if you look at even what some of the earlier speakers were pointing to, that it's that low to medium skilled jobs that are likely to be threatened by automation, right? And the high skilled jobs are more secure. So in a country like India, where a large part of your labor is within that low to medium skill category, there is a real threat of job displacement. And I think more than also job displacement, what's really relevant in the Indian context is that I think there is a threat to possibilities for upward socio-economic mobility, right? So if you think of your labor that is within the informal sector of the economy and sees that clerical job or sees that job in a retail outfit as aspirational, or sees that job in a call center as aspirational, those entry-level jobs within the formal sector is the way for them to break out of the poverty trap, right? But as those jobs get automated, what happens to that space, right? What are those opportunities for upward socioeconomic mobility? And especially in a country like India, where you have a huge youth population that is very, very aspirational and that is connected and exposed to the best of what is available in the world. So how do you respond to those aspirations, I think, is a key challenge for Indian policymakers going forward. I think as the only woman on the panel, I should certainly take the moment to make this point that women are particularly susceptible to the impacts of automation. If you look at industries in India and globally, women are the ones who occupy those entry-level jobs, and those jobs are where we're likely to see automation happen first, right? So the garment industry is a very good example of this, and it's the same for other marginalized social groups as well, because they've historically not have had access to education educational and work opportunities that have allowed them to move upwards socioeconomically, those marginalized social groups, we're likely to see the impacts, the detrimental impacts more pronounced for them, right? I think there is a new kind of work that is being created that we often don't speak about, and that is the kind of invisible low-wage labor that is actually fueling the AI industry. So all the high-value AI work is happening in very select geographies in the world. In countries like India, what we see is that large masses of individuals are engaged in menial tasks like data annotation, right? And sure, data annotation could be thought of as a step up from manual labor, and the association with technology is aspirational for many. So I'm not trying to say that that data annotation industry does not present an opportunity, but I think that Indian policymakers and other policymakers in the global South really need to consider what is the future of the data annotation industry. If you look at developments such as GPT-3, the importance of big data is likely to decline. With the importance of computational power is likely to increase. The importance of storage capacities is likely to increase, and neither of those are something which India currently has an adequate capacity in. So if data annotation is where we're expecting to move that low skill labor from agriculture, for an example, into these industries, we really need to think about the future of that industry in itself, right? And think about 25 years from now, what is that industry going to look like 25 years from now? And of course, the question is that, is this good work? Is this decent work? And I think that that's something that we need to think about as well. I think the trouble also is that we won't be able to skill fast enough. There's a lot of talk about upgrading skills, about reskilling, but can we do it fast enough? And even if we can do it fast enough, the same people who lose their jobs will not be the same people who will get the new jobs. There will certainly be a generational gap. That 50-year-old who has lost his job because he has not been able to upskill is not going to be that data scientist, right? There is going to be a job loss, and there is a generational issue that we need to think about. So I think, and I'll conclude with that, right? That I think efficiency gains are very important. Productivity gains are very, very important. There's no doubt about that. And like the other speakers have pointed out, it can lead to an increase in economic growth. It can lead to GDP growth. But efficiency gains cannot be the only metric, specifically for labor surplus countries like India. So for a labor surplus country like India, the choices we have to make are not the same as the choices in an industrialized economy. We have to recognize that we have a huge youth population that is aspirational, that does not match learning outcomes even to meet current industry requirements, right? So when we think about a national policy for AI, we really need to think beyond the efficiency gains into thinking about the aspiration of this youth population, and are we able to meet that demand, right? So I think the point here is that these choices are different in different countries depending on the composition of your labor market. And it's very important that countries like India and in the global South recognize this and make policies that speak to those realities, right? And maybe sorry, I said that was my final point, but this is now actually my final point. I think the one point that often also does not get looked at in conversations around AI, we typically focus on the job issue, but AI is also being used for hiring people. It's also being used to match skills and industries. It's also being used to evaluate performance. And while that has tremendous potential, I think we also need to recognize that AI can also reproduce existing societal inequities. So if you have a hiring-based system that recognizes certain skills as valuable, there'll be certain sections of society that are able to that have those skills already. So there is a real danger of reproducing those inequities, right? So I feel that these policies, the national policy for AI in the workplace, must be much better situated and reflective of the realities of the Indian labor market. Thank you.
But I'd like Rajiv Sodhi now. How can technology play a role in preparing employees for the new world of work? And can it play a role and exactly address some of the gaps that Urvashi is saying, that use technology to solve the technology created problem, right? And what are some of the ways in which organizations can help their employees thrive in a digital future? And I'd like you to take a perspective, not just from IT or ITES sort of environment or employer, but look at the retail, look at the agri market, look at the healthcare, hospitals, and so on. When you look at all of that, how would you respond to the current situation?
First of all, Ramanan, thanks for giving us the opportunity to be here. I think a great panel here, and also as probably the only representative from the business community, which has been labeled as the people who are creating the hype on AI. Like, let me just offer some perspective. I think first of all, great points and great discussion till now. I think what we've seen is, as rightly pointed out even earlier, right? It's not just about AI, but a set of technologies that which have been accelerating. I think that digital transformation has been happening for some time now. COVID certainly accelerated it. I mean, we have now used this term to say we are seeing 2 years of digital transformation in businesses happening in just 2 months, right? Because when the pandemic struck, everyone was expected. Everyone just adopted to technology and using technology to stay in touch, to maintain their business, to run that, right? That was happening. It was virtually overnight. And I want to share, the work we've been doing with our customers, whether it was frontline workers, hospitals, our own customers, which are enterprise, or even the small and medium business. Virtually everywhere, there was this need to either use remote working, right, or get access to their information, or security, which started coming up much later. So I think it is inevitable that you will have technology acceleration happen. I think this issue around jobs, I think Urvashi rightly pointed out, it's a labor surplus market in India, right? But I believe the issue is not about jobs, the issue is about skills, right? If you have skills, I'll give you a job. AI or no AI, I think you need to have skill for somebody to be employable and that to be then consumed in that pieces. And I think today, the need of the hour is that you have to have digital skilling here. Digital skills are the need that we have to, obviously all of us do a job. Now, this is such a massive problem that I actually believe there is no one company which can do on its own. We've been working on this for years. Partnering both between government with academia. I mean, even if you look at digital skills in the country today, the youth of the country. So NSDC, we partnered with NSDC to train over 1 million youth. 750,000 have already been happening. Students. That is happening, which is their teachers, which is there. We are now partnering with ISB to train business leaders, as was being discussed, that it's not just coding, you need problem solving skills. So you need business leaders who can understand the impact of technology and how to apply that in their business. We recently announced a digital skilling initiative, which actually does 3 things. Back to this issue around jobs and skill, it identifies, with LinkedIn, it identifies what are the jobs in demand across the economy and what skills are needed, right? And once you know these are the skills that are needed, it then provides through LinkedIn Learning, here are the skills that you need and here is the learning path for that, right? Both for knowledge workers and frontline workers. And then once it's given you that learning path, we then provide the certification so that you can have certified skill and you are going to be then employable in the country. But I think the real issue is you can't do this alone. You have to partner across the ecosystem to make sure every aspect of skill which is relevant is coming together over there. I think finally there are, Sridhar said it right, technology is neutral, right? But the question is, how long can technology be neutral, right? And what do we call as neutral? We talk about bias in AI. The bias in one part of India is very different from bias in another part of India, let alone the world, right? So, but I think it's important that we recognize that with great power, which is technology, right, it also comes great responsibility, which is a cliche, I know. And in the company today at Microsoft, we've instituted an initiative which we call as Responsible AI, which basically says, hey, you must be developing these great systems, but how do we make sure these systems are fair, they're free from bias, they are transparent, they are accountable to what they are doing, people can trust these systems. That's huge, because otherwise these systems are of no use. And it's not just Microsoft which has to do it. We're also creating the platform such that other people can test whether their systems are coming up in this manner or not. Now, we all know AI is created by developers. So we've actually released a toolkit where any software developer can release their code and test whether it is free from bias or is it getting exposed to certain kinds of bias. So that, we are also enabling the entire ecosystem to create technology which can be used here. So I'll pause here, Ramanan, but, I actually firmly believe what is happening today in the world is going to accelerate, the sort of how technology is getting used. I think our responsibility is make sure that these systems are using the technology responsibly, and we are skilling the ecosystem, because this skilling is actually absolutely a dire need, which all of us have to work towards. I'll pass it back to you.
Excellent, excellent, Rajiv. I think you very beautifully brought out that jobs, require skills, and skills. Without skills, you don't have jobs. And whether it is AI or not AI, you still need to acquire the skills. Rajiv, yeah, please go ahead.
I want to comment on Carl mentioned that he feels that the Luddite fallacy will play out again in the case of AI. And the Luddite fallacy was that revolutions destroy jobs, and they create misery. That's a fallacy. The Luddites believe that, and the fallacy is that actually you create more jobs and there's more prosperity. So he feels that will happen with AI. I want to explain that the Luddite fallacy, why it won't apply in the case of AI. And while we say that whenever there's a disruption, the disruption can create a disequilibrium. The whole equilibrium of things can fall apart, and of course there'll be a new equilibrium. But the new equilibrium will not be the same winners, same losers. It'll be new haves and have-nots. In the new equilibrium, there'll be new haves and have-nots. There may be new jobs, but not the same social demographics. The jobs in Silicon Valley to make driverless cars will not be doing any good to people in Africa and India who are drivers who lose their jobs. So people will lose jobs in one geography and make jobs in another geography. The haves and have-nots between countries will be different. The Industrial Revolution, which was cited by Carl as a great example of how things went on very nicely. But please remember that the Industrial Revolution took Britain, which was a very marginal economy, and made it into a world power, and took India, which was a world power economically, and made it into a colony. So the colonization is the result of the Industrial Revolution. So you cannot say that the Luddites were wrong and everything was fine because the old jobs were replaced by the new jobs. The point is that the new jobs went to England and the old jobs being destroyed were in India. So this is a huge example. Our own history tells you that the Luddite fallacy was actually, you cannot call it a fallacy, because in the long run, it affected our civilization. There is an intergenerational thing. In the displacement of agriculture workers, when agriculture was replaced by factories, yes, people lost agriculture jobs, but they gained factory jobs. However, it happened very slowly compared to AI disruption today. It happened over 2 generations. So if I was in my 30s or 40s as a farmer, I was not out of work. I did not have to go running, get out of farm and get a job in the factory. My children got factory jobs, but the disruption of the farm was so slow that I could keep working on my farm until I retired. The AI is so rapid that if I'm in my 30s and my job is disrupted, I cannot say that, I'll keep doing my job till I'm 60 and my kids will go and work in an AI capacity. It's taking people mid-career. We have to think of different population segments. Those who are very young, you can train them in AI and they'll be fine. But what about those who are mid-career, who are not capable of being retrained, who are maybe not even well educated, who are too slow to learn, and the employers are not going to employ them and retrain them. They'll rather employ young people. So we are talking about the disruption across geographies within the same country, because the new jobs will be created in one place and destroyed in another place. We're talking about maybe the recolonization between some countries that are becoming very powerful, United States, China, certain countries, and China is already colonizing Africa. And AI is a large part of it. China is already colonizing Africa. China is potentially colonizing Pakistan. So this concentration of wealth and concentration of power is up for grabs. Whenever there is a disequilibrium and chaos of this magnitude, yes, there will be a new equilibrium. Yes, there will be new jobs, but there will be new haves and have-nots, new concentrations of power. And this will be social disruption within a country, political disruption between countries, disruption intergenerational, because one generation will lose jobs, maybe their kids will be better off. but what happens to the older people? So this is like, I'll give you an example, a real example. Rajiv Sondhi lives in Gurgaon, so I'll tell you about Gurgaon, what happened. When the land developers took over a lot of farmland in Gurgaon, suddenly the farmers made a lot of money. So farmers couldn't do any farming, but these crores and crores of money went to their sons, the sons who were teenagers. They inherited all this money, and a lot of crime, a lot of the alcohol consumption, a lot of the gundagardi in Delhi came from the sons of farmers. These guys were not well educated, but they suddenly had a lot of money. And with money, no education, no need to job, they went around on rampages. So this is the social disruption that can happen. You could say that on an average, the Gurgaon peasants did okay. But intergenerationally, one generation lost their occupation, the next generation made out okay. So this intergenerational thing we have to consider. This is the problem that is particularly serious in the case of India because of a massive overpopulation. When you are disrupting such a huge equilibrium and creating a new equilibrium, which may be one generation later. I don't think that the loss of certain things and the replacement with other things will be simultaneous. I think you will have asynchronous activities. So things will be destroyed, careers will be destroyed, lives will be destroyed. There will be a period of disruption, and maybe a generation later, things will settle down and there'll be a new equilibrium, life will go on. But in the meantime, can India afford this at this point in time, considering whatever else it's facing? So this is a risk of recolonization, the risk of fragmentation of society, social breakdown of society. I'm a technocrat. I love technology. I want AI to succeed. My bottom line view is AI is good. We need it, but I feel that policymakers cannot ignore these risks. We cannot start with the one-line statement, AI will create more jobs than it will destroy, done deal. I don't buy that. I think I've read all these reports. I've read a whole lot of reports which say that, but they are taking data and arguments from other countries and applying them to India. I think India's case is very unique. And before we make an axiom that AI will automatically create more jobs than it will destroy, we really need to take a hard look at it. And I have taken a hard look at it. I've written a book on it. And I would love to discuss my findings vis-a-vis the axiom that everybody is using, including NITI Aayog, that AI will just create more jobs.
And I'd like now Dr. Malhotra to give his talk that we have been waiting for before we close the session.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. Let me make sure my slide is showing up. I guess it is. I am writing a book which will come out. It's called 5 Battlegrounds. And the book takes 5 battlegrounds of AI, one of which has to do with jobs and work. So since that's the panel I'm on, I'm going to limit myself to the battleground of jobs and work. And I'll let you sort of speculate and guess what are the other 4. So India has a very difficult and complex job of balancing the AI revolution. If you do too much, too quickly, the disruption will be too soon, and the reconstruction and positive aspects may not happen soon enough, and it may lead to unemployment, it may lead to social unrest, it may lead to exaggerating the inequities. If you don't do enough, then India will not be competitive. That's a serious problem that also has to be avoided. So India will not be competitive in terms of products, services, defense. Defense is a very important thing I'm also discussing in this book. Now, there are these reassurances that say there'll be more jobs created than taken away. And I think so much is at stake. Millions of lives are at stake. Tens of millions of families are at stake. So we should do some due diligence and check it out carefully. Previous revolutions did not have so much capital available, and the breakthrough was not scalable, and it was not instantly globalized. So the speed of adoption was slow. If you look at the mechanization of farms, if you look at the first industrial revolution in England, the second industrial revolution in England, all that, compare the speed of adoption with today's technology, completely different, because now you have huge institutions with capital. Suddenly a new solution can be scaled worldwide, globalized. And so the impact is rapid. And because the impact is rapid, it captures people, it traps people in mid-career. The mid-career worker, you cannot say, well, the next generation will do well. But what happens to the mid-career worker? That person is not going to be easily migrated. We can talk. I'll give you some data on retraining. How realistic is retraining based on some surveys? So the worker obsolescence for those who are not easily trainable is pretty dramatic, and the impact, based on my findings, is going to be very severe for people in the low socio-demographic, especially women, because a large part of these jobs which are easy to automate are by people who are otherwise also challenged, and women are a large part of that. The other thing to mention is that the labor share of GDP is declining. The labor share of GDP is declining. And there's a concentration of wealth. There are a lot of interesting studies on the concentration of wealth, how many, the top 1% own how much, what was it like 10 years ago, the top 10% own how much by country. And it's quite interesting. India has a serious problem with the concentration of wealth that'll actually get worse. So the new haves and the new have-nots will be different from the current haves and have-nots, and that's what every revolution does. It's an opportunity for some, but it's a problem for others. So we have to look out for those who are the least fortunate among us. That is humanity. We have to do that. So I'm taking that kind of a view. Now, also India is very different, because the issue is India's population is so huge. To what extent are these opportunities scalable? Someone mentioned that much of India is rural India, and they are not part of urban India, and they are not part of the organized sector. They don't have a regular paycheck, and they have their own ecosystem. This is fine. But I would like to mention, there are estimated about 80 million migrant workers who come from the rural area to get jobs in the urban area and send money home. Their remittances, an average migrant worker supports 3 persons back in his village. So you may have a driver in Delhi or a maid, and they're supporting their parents, maybe the in-laws, maybe some children. So when 80 million people were out of work, or a large number of them due to COVID, it affected village economy. So if there is disruption in urban India, in the industrial part of India, it will affect rural India, because these migrant workers will be affected. And if 80 million times 3, they're supporting on an average 3 persons, it's a few hundred million people out of Indian population that are making ends meet economically, because they have a son who's a driver somewhere, or a daughter who's a maid, or somewhere working in a factory. And we have a lot of economic studies are done on migrant workers in the Middle East who send remittances, the NRIs, or people in the US and various places. But I haven't seen a single economic study on the phenomenon within India of India and sending money back. And so the future of AI impact, you must look at how it will affect rural India, especially through the what happens to these migrant workers. And the migrant workers are doing labor intensive jobs. So this is an important thing. When you look at the education standards in India, we're talking about jumping onto AI, but actually even engineering graduates, and many others, the education standard is not that great. A top 1% from IITs and so on are brilliant people. Most of them go overseas, and they have great careers elsewhere, or they're working in India for some Western company as a subsidiary. The vast majority of Indian youth are not enjoying that. They're not part of that nice lifestyle. So the vast majority are not well educated. The unemployed. Unemployment is huge. Please note that the official statistics of unemployment in India do not include women, because it's assumed they're homemakers and don't want to work. This is a very interesting thing I just learned, that the official statistics of India do not include unemployed women, because it's assumed that they just don't want to work. So if you were to include that, the actual statistics would be very high. And then if you look at the unemployment of youth, it's a very high unemployment. The number of people entering the job age each year is several times more than the number of new jobs being created. So the problems are there. And then there is something called underemployment, which means the person has a job, but they're artificially created jobs. The government made jobs just to keep people employed. So there is also income inequality. If you look at income inequality, wealth inequality, it is not getting fixed in India. The problem is pretty serious. And this has nothing to do with AI. This is there anyway. AI will just exacerbate it. So I've already talked about Bain and Company has done, I think, a pretty good view, which is sympathetic to the labor. The McKinsey reports and PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young and all of them, they are more sort of corporate view because the corporates pay them. Bain also works for corporates, but I must say that Bain has taken a very labor-oriented view also. And according to them in the US, 20 to 30 million workers would be affected by 2030. It's jobs loss, wage pressure. So you won't lose your job, but wage pressure downwards because machines are doing this work. You cannot have escalation of wages, and wage inflation has been exceedingly low anyway. And then dramatic need for retraining. So let's talk about retraining. Now, a survey by the World Economic Forum. Now, I'm quoting World Economic Forum because they're usually pro-business, but here they're talking about the vulnerability of labor. They're saying that nearly a quarter of the companies are undecided or unlikely to pursue retraining of existing employees. Okay, which means that a lot of people have to just retrain themselves. The company doesn't have an official program per se. 33% said that they would prioritize, only 1/3 wanted to prioritize the employees who are most at risk, which means that the people who are most in need of reskilling and upskilling are not likely to get training from the corporate sector. This is true. I mean, if retraining is this panacea, we retrain people. I would like to see budgets. I would like to see commitments. I would like to see the auditing firms take a look at what's the future outlook of employee redundancy, and if they want to retrain, have they set aside the money? The money will be in thousands of crores. It's not a simple job to retrain such a huge workforce. We can say retraining, but who's going to pay for it? That has to be figured out. So a year later, in the 2019 World Economic Forum, New York Times went and did a survey of corporate people. And they said that here is what they wrote. They said that the corporate leaders talked a good game publicly on that they're concerned about the negative consequences of AI. They talked a good game in public. But in private, they had a different story. They were just interested in automating as much as they can, as fast as they can to keep up with competition. So this business of the corporate talk about, we will retrain, don't worry, is nice to hear, but I would like to see them put their money where their mouth is. I would like to see them quantify. I would like to see them reserve money, just like they are asked to reserve for pension. They should reserve for retraining. That should be one of the laws maybe, or at least an ethics. A company which is facing the possibility of employees becoming redundant should have the moral thing about setting aside some reserves. So my worker level issue, economic level issue, which is only one of the 5 battlegrounds, the others have nothing to do with this issue per se, is that those who are not AI workers, we have to separate those who will jump on the wagon of AI and be part of this new economy, and those who won't for whatever reasons, because you cannot get so many people trained and get them into jobs at various points in their life. It just won't happen. So I'm worried about the 500 million, the bottom half of the pyramid. Many of them are surviving because a migrant worker from Delhi or Chennai or somewhere sends them money. And they, in this negotiation on what happens with AI, what are the rights and so on of AI, what are the responsibilities, I don't see the labor being sophisticated enough to represent themselves. I don't think they have a voice because they're just not aware of what's going on. And generally the AI community have done a good job of telling everybody that things are going to be okay, so you don't need to worry. So this retraining business, my question is, who will do it? When will they do it? Who's going to pay for it? Especially the older workers. So the issue I worry about is a very high impact on Indian workers and the possible social unrest it could cause. Now, there's a good report by NITI Aayog. Now I'm going to shift to those who are going to be on the AI bandwagon. I talked about those who will miss the bandwagon, and that's a very serious social disruption. But what about those who are targets to join the AI bandwagon, who are these engineers, STEM people, and so on? NITI Aayog is very honest, and I credit them for that. They took good stock of this thing, the situation in India. 2.5 to 3 million STEM graduates a year, but they're doing routine, mundane, low tech, labor intensive work, maintenance work. I'm much older than you guys. I came to the United States about 50 years ago as a software guy. And I saw there was no software export industry. I was one of the first, in fact, I was a project manager of the first TCS software project in the United States. I can go into that later. So that began, and then it created credibility. Then the floodgates opened, then a whole lot of other people came, and so on. So since then, I've seen that it's basically export of labor. It's a labor arbitrage. A lot of people made a lot of money. I have friends who made tons of money just importing, to solve the Y2K bug and all that stuff. Lots of money was made, but we didn't go up the value chain. So this report names TCS, Wipro, and Infosys, but I think they should name a lot more. As people who kind of milked it, made tons of money, but did not reinvest in high value added. They did not contribute to real research. And this is particularly unfortunate because, these companies are running the guts of United States banks, healthcare, government, manufacturing. They are really right they're looking at the entire process and automating it. So in terms of vertical market application, these companies have a lot of it. So they should have created Watson and automated these. They should have said, we know how this bank works because we have so many thousand people working in your bank running the whole IT. So since we are running the IT, the brains of your bank, we understand it. So we're going to come up with what this vertical market needs. What is the AI solution for your bank or for your hospital or whatever the establishment may be? I would say people in BPO, people who got large contracts running industries in the United States, the backbone of the industry could be the back office or the front office, have a unique knowledge about how that vertical market works. We just haven't had the ambition to say, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to go up the value chain and I'm going to supply the turnkey solution. So it's very sad that India as the leader of software now lags behind China who's the leader of AI. I mean, if we had thought through this, if our people had the vision, our tech companies, the leaders had the vision, government had the vision, then starting 15, 20 years ago, we would have said, let's take a certain percentage of all this IT export, software export, body shopping export, let's put that into AI investments because that's where the future is. This didn't happen. So we are paying the price of that. Now, Indian companies have been addicted to labor arbitrage. That's what I just said. We send low sort of one kind of labor to the Middle East. They are crane operators, drivers, all kind of things they're doing, housework. And we're sending a different kind of labor to United States, different kind of labor. So we are kind of an exporter of raw labor. And this is very sad for me that the country is not thinking big enough. Our people are brilliant. They deserve a chance to be developed into really high value producers. The difference between an Indian who's in the United States and who runs a company and owns equity and his brother sitting in India, there's no difference in brains. It's just that here is the opportunity in this country where people have become owners of technology, whereas in India, the same guys are supplying labor and the technology is owned by the Western country or whichever country, Chinese or whoever owns it. We are supplying raw labor to them, helping them build their technology. And then they are re-exporting the technology back to us, and we are very grateful. The technology could come in the form of fighter jets, for military equipment. A lot of it is high technology, a lot of it is software, a lot of it is AI. So it could be embedded in that. It could be in the form of a digital platform. It could be in the form of some social media or whatever form it comes back in. The point is we are giving raw labor, which is the brains for making all this. Somebody else owns the intellectual property. They send it back to us, and we are very proud that we are the largest installed base of mobiles or whatever it is, WhatsApp, and more Google searches in India than anywhere else. So we are very proud to be the consumer of technology, not the producer of technology. And the irony is that much of the labor that went into it is our labor. So this is the second last slide. So we have to climb the value chain, which means from human resource development, which is what the country is focusing on. We also need to have more ownership of big data. And I have a chapter in this book on some big data that we have actually given away. The training of algorithms, the understanding of our psychology, of what motivates Indians, how to make them fight each other, how to win elections, lose elections, all this Russian hacking and intervention that happened in the US elections, that kind of a thing can happen, probably is happening in India. Certainly in terms of social, political, financial, marketing-oriented behavior, it is being managed by these social media algorithms with big data on Indians. And we don't control it. Somebody else is pulling the strings. Now, we need our own trained algorithms, training of algorithms, our own turnkey solutions, our own proprietary platforms. I would love to see a project like send a spacecraft to the moon kind of project. I would like to see it similar to ISRO and similar to Bhabha Atomic Research Center, a huge establishment set up by the Indian government for artificial intelligence and related technologies that come under artificial intelligence. So we would say, okay, have milestones like we need our own social media with X% market share compared to whatever the foreign media are. I'm not saying like China, we have to ban those guys, but we certainly need to have our own options with significant market share, particularly in Indian languages. And we need to have turnkey solutions like Watson so that we are not just supplying raw data, but high value added. I think that's the way for the future. And my conclusion is India must rise as producer of AI technology rather than consumer. Right now, we are taking models, a lot of software, a lot of platforms from the foreign countries and making our consumer products, consumer services out of it. But we are not developing original material ourselves. A large part of it has to do with hardware. We have to get into the hardware business, quantum computing. Quantum computing is going to be a force multiplier in AI. So I think my time is out, so I will stop. And thank you so much for allowing me these few extra minutes. I'm delighted and honored to be here with this wonderful panel, wonderful audience, and look forward to many more interactions. But I do want you to know, if you want to know more about my book, you can contact me at this place.
Thank you, Rajiv ji, for an excellent talk. And what a way to end it. India must rise as a producer rather than just as a consumer. And of course, India, with its 1.3 billion people, will automatically become consumers of great technology. But we have to rise up the value chain. We have the potential. We have the intellectual horsepower. We have the demographic dividend. And we have a fast rising economy, all of which are working towards its favor. So how do we address some of the challenges that you have mentioned in your brilliant talk and be able to surmount those challenges and at the same time be a leader in AI in the global landscape? So with that, I'd like to once again thank all the speakers, the panelists. I'd like to thank once again Mr. Mikhal, Dr. Carl Benedict, Prashant Phatak, Mr. Sridhar Vembu, Dr. Urvashi Aneja, Mr. Rajiv Sodhi, and Mr. Rajiv Malhotra for an excellent session that we have had. I have enjoyed it very much. I'm sure all the audience who have participated, who have listened to you, would have enjoyed it. It was a wonderful exchange of opinions, personal opinions, as well as opinions that were very, very relevant to the topic under consideration and discussion. Thank you very much. Be safe. Have a great evening or a great morning or a great afternoon, wherever you are, and do keep in touch. This is Ramanan, Mission Director, Atal Innovation Mission from NITI Aayog. And once again, my thanks to everybody who has participated.